And on this video, I give you my unofficial, official Hall of Fame ballot. Let's get into it. What's going on, baseball fans? Jeremy Laracuente here for the Baseball Banter broadcast. And as I said in the open, I'm going to be bringing you my unofficial, official Hall of Fame ballot. Now, no, I don't officially get a ballot and an opportunity to cast my vote for the Hall of Fame, but I will give you guys my unofficial ballot and tell you exactly why each and every man deserves a spot in Cooperstown. So let's get into it. Now, before we do that, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below as well as the bell to stay notified of every time we drop new content here on the Laracuente Legend Network. It's going to be a lot of new content coming for you guys in 2021, and you want to make sure you keep it locked in by hitting that subscribe button. Now, as we get into this, I want to make sure that you guys understand and know that I'm going to be following the same rules as the BBWAA, the Baseball Writers Association of America, and limit myself to only 10 selections on my ballot. Now, I encourage you make your own list, see who falls off of your ballot, who stays on, what factors in and to your personal bias into who you select. Let me know your ballot down in the comment section below and we'll discuss it further. Also, before we get into my list, I want you to know there's a corresponding and accompanying article on Laracuenteledger.com that has a lot more details on each and every person that I've selected for my ballot. So make sure you head over to Laracuenteledger.com. I will leave links in the show notes below for the accompanying article of my ballot selection. So let's get into it. Now, I'm going to be giving you my list in descending order, so we're going to start from the last person on the list, alphabetically speaking, and that is Billy Wagner. Now, when it comes to Billy Wagner, I can get into the numbers, and I do get into the numbers on Laracuenteledger.com, but outside of the saves total and the total innings pitched, Billy Wagner was a much better pitcher than Trevor Hoffman, and Trevor Hoffman was a clear-cut first ballot Hall of Famer. So if you're looking at the numbers and the peripherals and the actual things a pitcher can control, Billy Wagner was much better than Trevor Hoffman. Now, as we move up the list, we go to Omar Vizquel. Now, when you look at Omar Vizquel, he's going to constantly be compared to Ozzie Smith and be not quite as good as Ozzie Smith. Now, the thing that I will say here, as I also said in the article, when you look at Tim Raines, he was often compared to Rickey Henderson and not being as good, and that kept him out of the Hall of Fame for a very long time. But when you compare yourself to the best, you're always going to fall short. That does not diminish the talent and the ability of the next best guy. And in Tim Raines' case, he fell behind Rickey Henderson, and in Omar Vizquel's case, he falls behind Ozzie Smith. That does not diminish his ability and his candidacy for the Hall of Fame. Omar would have 11 Gold Gloves and over 2,800 hits throughout his 24 Major League career, and while people will knock Omar because he had 2,800 hits because of playing for 24 years, it still takes longevity to be able to stay in the game at the level of the major leagues, and especially being able to still play shortstop into his 40s. That, to me, is a Hall of Famer. Now, moving up the list is Curt Schilling. Now, Schilling's biggest knock is his mouth. There's no doubt about it. That's been what has most kept him out of the Hall of Fame to this point. To me, you have to separate the man on Twitter and the man that was on the field. When you look at what he was on the field, there's no doubt about it. Curt Schilling was one of the best big game pitchers in Major League Baseball history. His ERA for the postseason was a run plus lower than what it was during the regular season. There's no doubt about it. Curt Schilling deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Ignore what the man says on Twitter and off the field, and just focus on what he did on the field, because it's the National Baseball Hall of Fame. It's about what he did on the field in the game of baseball. That's what matters. Curt Schilling is a Hall of Famer. Next man up on my list is arguably one of the best defensive third basemen in history, and that's Scott Rolen. Often Rolen gets compared to Mike Schmidt, and with good reason. Mike Schmidt is one of the best defenders in baseball history. His total defensive runs saved is 129 for his career for Schmidt. Scott Rolen, 140. There's no doubt about it. When you look at what Rolen was capable of doing on the defensive end, that's where the majority of his case is based, as is most of the guys on this list for me. But when you add in his offensive ability, now you're dealing with a guy who definitely exceeds the limit. When you use Jay Jaffe's method of JAWS for determining Hall of Fame candidates' contendership status, 55 is the basis for Hall of Fame. Scott Rolen is at 70. There's no question, if you really look at the numbers and take away personal bias, Scott Rolen is a Hall of Famer. Next man up on the list is Jeff Kent. Jeff Kent is arguably one of the best second basemen in Major League Baseball history. And if you listen to Christopher Mad Dog Russo on MLB Network or MLB Network Radio throughout this Hall of Fame time, whether they're going through the nominees, the candidacy, and the actual announcement, he's always making the case for Jeff Kent. So if you want to hear what Mad Dog has to say, make sure you check him out on MLB Network. He talks about Jeff Kent all the time in the month of January leading up to the selection of Hall of Fame. Jeff Kent is one of the best second basemen in history. No, he's not going to be a stellar defender. He never was, but he knew how to position himself. To me, it's very much like Derek Jeter, who was never once questioned about being the best shortstop defensively speaking. But Jeter would win 5 Gold Gloves because he was smart about his approach and knew where to place himself. Jeff Kent, while not being at that same level of positioning and placement, would be smarter about his approach and making up for his defensive lapses. But when you look at Jeff Kent's case, he has an OPS plus for his career of 136. That's well above all-star level and deserves the conversation at bare minimum to join the Hall of Fame candidacy. Now, the next 2 guys I'm going to lump together as they're very similar in terms of what they bring to the table, and that's Andruw Jones and Torrey Hunter. Both guys' cases stand and place themselves on defense. Now, much like Scott Rolen, their offensive ability also elevated them to the next level and pushed them into the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. Torrey Hunter would walk away with 9 Gold Gloves, Andruw Jones with 10. And then you add in what they did offensively. Now, with Torrey Hunter's case, we often hear about guys being kept out of the Hall of Fame because of the character clause. However, they never get boosted up because of the character clause. In my opinion, that's where we need to change this. Torrey Hunter goes down as one of the best men and the best leaders in terms of Major League Baseball clubhouses and every other humanitarian effort. Torrey Hunter deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and let's use the character clause for good instead of for evil each and every time. And Andruw Jones, the offensive ability, yes, while his career was kind of a shortened peak due to injuries and ineffectiveness, there's no doubt about it, his peak was elevated extremely high on top of his defensive prowess. Andruw Jones and Torrey Hunter both deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, the next man up is constantly kept out of the discussion for some of the best players in the history of baseball and being knocked for his potential Hall of Fame candidacy because he would play his entire career in Colorado, and that's Todd Helton. Helton is one of these guys that if he played anywhere else would be a serious contender for the Hall of Fame, and people would not be questioning his candidacy. But because he would play his entire career in Colorado, that would knock his ability to really be seen as a Hall of Fame contender. Now, again, using Jaw's method of 55 WAR as a Hall of Famer, Todd Helton would be at 61.8. Again, many pundits will look at his home and road splits and use the fact that he played his Coors Field to boost his offensive numbers, but say he would not be that same great player on the road. If you ever listen to MLB Network and you hear the former Rocky GM Dan O'Dowd speak about the effects on the body that playing at Coors Field in the high altitude would have, Todd Helton is one of these guys that is severely affected. We would see Larry Walker, who played a lot of his career in Colorado, be affected negatively for a very long time when it came to the Hall of Fame conversation. Todd Helton is going to face the same repercussions. In my opinion, it's just not a very good logical argument for a player who was definitely a Hall of Fame player. Now, these next 2 guys will always be lumped together because of PED suspicions, and that is Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. Now, I'm going to take both of their cases individually, but just know, without a doubt, they both merit a place in the Hall of Fame. When you look at Roger Clemens, 7 Cy Young Award wins, as well as being one of the most dominant pitchers during the steroid era. When you look at what he did for his career, Clemens would have a career ERA of 3.12 and 354 wins. Now, if you know me, if you've listened to me on the Laracuente Ledger Network, on the Baseball Banter broadcast, you know that I don't really believe in pitcher wins. To me, that's more of a team statistic than an individual pitcher statistic. However, that being said, 354 wins is a lot of wins. Now, for his career, Roger Clemens would pitch 4,916 and 2/3 innings. He would have 4,672 strikeouts. That, to me, is one of the biggest factors of displaying the dominance of Roger Clemens. He would pitch throughout the steroid era and still be one of the very, very best. Now, when it comes to Barry Bonds, on the other hand, you would look at the best hitter in Major League Baseball for a very long stretch of time. 762 career home runs, the most ever. 73 home runs, the most ever for a single season. When you look at Barry Bonds' career, let's just get into some of the numbers. He would have 2,935 career hits, 1,996 RBIs, and this is just absolutely ridiculous, but a Major League record 2,558 walks, and of which 688 of them were intentional. Barry Bonds would also have 7 MVPs and be the most feared hitter for a very long time in Major League Baseball. Now, whatever your thoughts are on the PED and the PED era, there's no doubt about it that it was running through the game, and there's no way to discern who was and was not using performance-enhancing drugs during that time. In my opinion, there's already guys that were using performance-enhancing drugs in the Hall of Fame. So to penalize the 2 biggest names and the 2 best players from that era that have the suspicion and likely did use, let's just call a spade, they likely were using performance-enhancing drugs, but to keep them out, to me, does an injustice to the Hall of Fame and to the history of the game. Barry Bonds, before 1998, was without question a first ballot Hall of Famer. At this point, Barry Bonds is still the only man, and likely going to be the only man, with 500 home runs and 500 steals for his career. Again, 7 MVPs for Bonds, 7 Cy Youngs for Roger Clemens. There's no doubt about it in my mind, both of these men deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know down in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on my ballot? What would your ballot look like? Who's making your ballot that did not make mine? Let's get into a discussion further in the comment section below. As always, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as the bell to stay notified of every time we drop new content here on the Laracuente Ledger Network. Keep it locked in, as we have more things coming through the rest of the week and throughout the rest of 2021. And the only way to do that is by hitting that subscribe and that bell so you're alerted every time we drop new content here. Make sure you check out our sister channel, WeSibs, as they have a ton of new content coming as well. And join us both on Patreon by heading over to patreon.com, searching for the Laracuente Ledger Network, and joining us there. Your support on Patreon and here on the Laracuente Ledger Network YouTube channel, as well as listening to us on the Laracuente Ledger podcast across all podcast listening platforms, really helps the channel move up and rank higher in the algorithm for YouTube, as well as for the podcast algorithms. Your support is really what's going to help continue to being able to have us bring the best and latest to you guys. So I want to thank you for taking the time out. Once again, let me know your ballots down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys the next time the latest news, notes, and my personal thoughts, theories, and opinions have to drop about the game of Major League Baseball. Peace.